Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here on time. I am recording this webinar so I can send the recording to people who were not able to attend live, and to you also if you'd like to watch it again. I think you will want it because Miriam will bring a lot of new information and tricks and stuff. So let's start. Let me start by introducing Miriam. For those of you who would like to open your cameras, it would be great. So Miriam and I would be able to see your faces and understand if you like it or not. Thank you, Maximiliano. But
If
if
there's
you
total
have,
confusion on your faces, we need to
if
know.
you're like, I can understand a
What is
word
this?
that you're saying. But of course, feel free to do that. But please keep yourselves muted, okay? Everyone is muted. Excellent. So let me start by introducing Miriam. Okay, so she's a lawyer, and she has just started a new project, which I will read, so I do not miss anything, any detail. And Miriam speaks Portuguese, Spanish, and other languages, but for this webinar, we'll keep it to English, okay? So you guys can practice. Excellent. So Miriam Sears is now a partner at, I'm sorry, I don't speak French, Savo Laporte. Yeah, more or less. Okay,
That's
acceptable.
good. That's very good. Portuguese
Uh,
speakers are always actually very good at pronouncing French. I found that because of the nasal vowels are very similar. So
maybe, and of course, she speaks French, so she can correct my lack of French. So she's a partner at Savo Laporte. This firm is an investment treaty arbitration, international commercial arbitration, and public international law boutique. It is currently based in Paris and Montreal, and Miriam will continue to be based in Toronto. She will continue her investor state and international commercial arbitration practice with a particular focus on mining and energy. On mining and energy projects and on projects in Latin America, as well as her arbitral award set aside and enforcement practice. She is also developing an arbitrator practice and is included on the arbitration place next gen roster. So this is her new adventure, and I just congratulated her earlier because this is a huge step in her career. And Miriam has also founded English for Lawyers on the side, which used to include legal English consulting. But right now, this project is a LinkedIn page with short posts intended to help lawyers whose first language is not English use English for professional purposes. And of course, you are all invited to follow her page on LinkedIn. And so English for Lawyers on LinkedIn.
I'll put the link in the chat if anyone's interested.
Excellent, please. Excellent. Yes, yes, of course. If you can do that, it would be amazing. And so Miriam found me on the internet, and then we had a call. We connected immediately. So she is a lawyer from Canada. She speaks a lot of languages. And since she speaks a lot of languages, she knows how hard it is to speak another language and another legal language, right? So we here are, I think most of us are Brazilians, and we were born in Brazil, of course, if you are Brazilians. And our native language is Portuguese, and this is really hard to write in English, and it is even harder to write well in legal context. So I invited Miriam to be here tonight with all of us to give us some tips, some pro tips, So she's a native speaker, she's a lawyer, so she knows what she's talking about. And she was really kind to accept this invitation. And Miriam, I know that with your new adventure, you're really busy, you have new clients. So thank you very, very much for making time for us tonight.
It's a pleasure.
So
Thanks for having me.
I will leave you guys with Miriam. Of course, I'll be here all the time. If you have questions, please click on the hand here. There's a reaction button at the bottom.
Or just raise your hand.
Yeah, or just raise your hands. Miriam,
Analog.
yeah. And
this is what you did in 2019 and before.
Right, before our Zoom. And if you're too shy to open your mic, just type your questions in the chat and I will be asking Miriam the questions, okay? So Miriam.
Perfect.
Thank
you
you again.
for that
Welcome.
generous introduction. Thank you. And I just want to note that I think Maximiliano is a Spanish speaker, not Brazilian. Is that right? So we have one Spanish speaker and everyone else is Brazilian.
Great.
Sorry,
Okay,
you are very seriously outnumbered here, Maximiliano. I'll do my best to. Fortunately, the advice, the languages are so similar between Portuguese and Spanish that the advice tends to apply to both. If you were Chinese or Russian or something, it might be a different story. But I think it should be good. But if you have any special questions because you're not Brazilian, just let me know. So thank you again for having me. So yeah, so Bruna, you speak Portuguese? Okay, great, perfect. So Bruna, as she said, I'm not an English teacher. I did do a little bit of English, legal English consulting for a little while during my transition, and now I'm back to being a full-time lawyer. But the context for why I became interested in these types of issues is because I've worked so much with Latin America and Brazil in my arbitration practice. I'm constantly working with lawyers from your region, and I noticed that, I mean, unfortunately, English has become the world language, and so people have to work in English whose first language is not English. And I just really noticed that how hard it can be. And you know, even myself, as Bruno mentioned, I find myself having to work in Spanish quite a lot, also in Portuguese a little bit. And so vice versa, I can also understand. And I found my friends were asking me for help a lot. How do I write this? How do I do that? So I thought I would start this kind of page, and it sort of explains terminology and some writing topics. So I invite you to follow it if it's helpful. I post a couple of times a week, usually on various topics. So great. Thanks, Carla. Carla says that she already follows my page. I know. I think you've liked some of my posts even, Carla. So thank you for that. And
Carla is one of our partners here. She's a sweetheart, and she teaches legal English from time to time. So if Carla likes it, I am sure you'll all like it. So
perfect.
Go there, yeah.
But I'm not here to promote my page, but to help you with some legal English topics. So why don't I do have some stuff planned, but why don't I start with asking you, what are the situations in which you find yourself using English in your professional life, and what are some of the difficulties that you have? That will help. If enough of you answer those questions, it'll help me plan the rest of the hour. Do I have a volunteer to start? Ana Claudia looks like she's typing.
Yeah, if you're too shy to open your mic or
and if she's not typing, I'm forcing her to start typing now. She's been exposed.
Okay, I'm going to talk.
Yay.
I think making reports and analyzing contracts, both huge challenges that I have nowadays, I think.
So making reports, do you mean to clients, like opinions, or something different?
And I make a lot of due diligence. I'm an environmental lawyer, and so
Okay.
I have to do these reports, and I think it's my huge challenge.
And what's difficult about it? Is it the vocabulary or the grammar or everything?
I think that is it. Explain the idea.
Yeah.
One situation needs to think in Portuguese and try to explain environmental law in Portuguese.
Yeah.
Then you have to translate the idea. Sometimes it's difficult to materialize what I want to explain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. That's it's kind of an because law is difficult to begin with, right? Even in your own language.
Yes.
So you're adding a second degree of complication to that. I definitely understand. Okay. Anyone else? Katya, you're a certified translator working with legal translation, contracts, powers of attorney. Okay. And what do you find difficult? Tabata says she analyzes contracts every day, making comments and expressing. Yeah, contracts is a whole different thing, isn't it? The reason it's different is that it's not, I mean, it's not normal language. No one talks like, or even writes an email like you would write a contract, right? Even in Portuguese, it's like a totally different language in and of itself. So it's definitely hard. The good thing I have found about contracts, though, is although the language is kind of very formal and older in many ways in style, it actually can be quite formulaic in the sense that you see the same phrases over and over again. And because of that, I find that the automatic translation software actually does a pretty good job with contracts, like DeepL. I don't know if you've used that before. But I find DeepL is actually quite good Portuguese to English and Spanish to English for contracts. Where it has a little bit more difficulty is natural language, because it's not sort of a pattern that it's seen a million times before. Okay, anybody else have anything they want to share about difficulties? Katya, translating the Portuguese constructions results in strange constructions in English. Definitely. And I want to talk about some of that stuff. And it's the same for Spanish too. Because you're not translating, I mean, this is introductory translation, right? You're not translating word for word. You have to translate meaning for meaning or sense for sense, which means that you have to change the way the sentence is constructed to make it sound natural. I shouldn't say you have to, because you don't have to, because you're not native speakers. So it's not a huge problem if you write an email and it doesn't sound like a native speaker wrote it. That's normal. So that you should all be relieved, because that's, it's not like it's a big problem. But if your goal is to actually, take your practice to the next level and be able to communicate better and with less effort with foreign clients and other people that you're working with, then yes, you can work on trying to think in English and how you communicate in English. Think to yourself, how would a person whose first language is English express the same idea? And it's very difficult. Does anybody know what the number one best way to start doing that is, both for speaking and for writing? Ana Claudia, I see you talking, but you're on mute.
To do.
To do? Yeah, but even better than doing. So the best way to learn how to write it, yeah, exactly. Maximiliano has it. It's reading. And the best way to learn how to speak is listening. So more than anything I can teach you today, if you want to improve your written legal English, read legal things in English. You'll see that on my page. What I tend to do is reshare some of the, those kind of short articles that law firms publish, or court decisions sometimes, just things on a particular topic that might be of interest. because I found that people don't necessarily know where to find those things. If you're in Brazil, you probably have mailing lists of legal updates from Brazil, but maybe you don't have them from the US and the UK and so on. So I receive all of that. I look at what I think might be interesting, and I post it with a bit of I always put like a short explanation. And I do the same with podcasts, so and sometimes YouTube videos. So I think that's a really, like I say, more than anything that I can sit here and talk to you about right now, that's the best way, because by reading the constructions and how the lawyers are expressing the ideas, you're not only learning the vocabulary that they're using, but also, the way the sentences are constructed. And that's the best way for legal English, because you can learn, business English by reading the business news, and literary English by reading books, and, normal colloquial English by watching Netflix. But unless you're actually reading in English legal things, it's very difficult to improve your legal English. So that would be my #1 suggestion, is just read as much as you can about legal topics in your area. So Ana Claudia's environmental law, you can get on newsletters and websites and so on and get them sent to you, and just, read it. Sounds so simple. Okay, well, what I had planned for today is a bit of an email drafting exercise. The reason it's an email is because we don't have time to edit a whole memo, and a contract is a little bit of a different thing. And I thought everyone has to write emails every day. It's the most common thing that you would have to do. And it's also, if you want to appear like you're closer to a native speaker, not a native speaker, but that your English level is higher, that's kind of, if say you're working with colleagues in the US or in the UK or wherever, that's what they'll see from you every day, right? They're not going to see, you're not writing them an opinion letter every day. You're probably writing them an email every day. So I thought an email is something small that we can work with together, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you. Any questions at all before we get started? No. Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And I should say also is sometimes I talk quickly, so if anyone doesn't understand what I'm saying, please don't be shy to ask me to repeat it, okay? Okay, so can you guys see the Word document? Yes, perfect. Okay, so I have my information here. I'll send them to you. I'll send this document to you. But I thought what we would do is pretend that we had asked a junior lawyer in our law firm. So we're all a law firm here. We're colleagues in a law firm. And we need to send this email to opposing counsel, so the lawyer for the other side. And we asked our junior colleague, our younger colleague, to write this. And I think you'll read it, and hopefully you'll agree that it's pretty bad. So I thought that what we could do is we could fix it together. And in doing that, you can see, if this were your first draft, maybe it's not, the best first draft that you could ever write, how would you go about editing it to make it better before it's ready to send? So I'll just read it, and then step 1, if anyone doesn't understand something in it, then please ask me to explain, because before we start editing, we need to understand. And just so you know, now that I have, oh no, okay, never mind. I was gonna say I couldn't see all of you now that I've shared my screen, but I can. Perfect. Okay, so I'll start reading it. If anyone has a question about what it means, please say so. So the email is from me to Tom Jones, costume rental agreement. So a costume like for Carnival, fantasia. Dear sirs or madams, kindly instruct your client to accept delivery of the costumes it agreed to take the rental of. The contract is extremely clear that your company has an obligation to rent the costumes, comma. It says that force majeure does not apply in this type of situation, comma, because there is no inability on the part of your client to perform its obligations, comma. So there is no right to claim force majeure, comma. Anybody annoyed by the number of commas in a row here? I am. Therefore, your client, I'm annoyed by it and I wrote it. Therefore, your client absolutely must pay for the costumes, period. We hope that you will accept our sincere regards. Miriam Sears, lawyer, big scary law firm, LLP. That is not the name of my new firm. Bruna said it's a French name. That's also not what it means. Okay. Does everyone know force majeure? It's also French, yeah. It's probably força maior in Portuguese. Yeah, very similar. Okay, perfect. Everyone's talking about force majeure these days because of COVID. So does anyone need an explanation of what it actually means? If you do, you're not saying so. That's okay. Maximiliano, did you have your hand up or did I make that up? No? Okay, perfect. Okay, so why don't we start with a little bit of brainstorming about what are some of the things that are wrong with this that we can fix. Oh, wait, I see somebody in the chat. Sorry if I miss you. It's because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see everyone and the chat all at the same time. Bruna, can you see the chat? I can't see it right now.
Yeah. I'll check the chat and then I'll interrupt you if necessary. So Katya is saying force majeure equals act of God.
Yes. Yes, but, because lawyers always have a but.
And Maximiliano said his mic's not working or something.
Okay.
Yeah, lawyers always use
There's
the word
always
but.
a but. I think I'm not an expert on this topic. I think because lately there's a lot of litigation about force majeure clauses, right? And do they cover COVID or not? And I think some courts are interpreting acts of God as being more limited to, natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, that kind of thing, whereas force majeure could be a broader thing. For example, a strike, a workers' strike, under some clauses, obviously it depends on the language of the clause, right, as with everything, but under some of the language of some clauses, a workers' strike could be force majeure, but it's not an act of God because it's not natural, obviously. So, but yes, in many ways the same, and probably COVID would be an act of God, I guess. So, okay. Any other? Does anyone want to take could everyone think of one problem with this and write it in the chat? I'll give you a few minutes. And then Bruna can summarize them because I can't see the chat.
Sure. Tabitha is saying it sounds overly formal, right? Dear sirs and madame, I don't know how to say it. Katya said too many commas sounds a bit abrupt.
Yeah, definitely abrupt. The person who said it sounds abrupt, which part are you referring to specifically?
Carla Saboya said extremely long sentences, just two in the whole email.
Yeah. So which sentence is a candidate for turning into many sentences?
Katya said about the abrupt part, she thinks the last part is really abrupt or a bit abrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, the first part too. Okay. Yeah, all of those are I absolutely agree. What about the subject line? Does anybody have a problem with the subject line? Nobody? Well, I have a problem with the subject line, and I'm about to tell you what it is.
Nubia said it's not very polite to say it's extremely clear.
Right. Because I'm sure the other side doesn't agree that it's extremely clear. Otherwise, they would have accepted the costumes.
Exactly.
And it also doesn't help you. I mean, that doesn't help. Saying that doesn't help you convince the other side, right? It's better to say, well, here's the language, and the obligation is under the language of the contract. That shows the other side that they have to accept the costumes. Saying that it's clear doesn't it's not convincing. Okay, and anything else before I tell you what I think is wrong with the subject line? Anna Claudia, you're talking, but you're muted.
No
Tabata.
problem. I'm just repeating what I'm seeing in the chat. I agree.
Ah.
I agree.
You're agreeing. Great.
And Tabata says, absolutely must pay for the costumes. Yeah, I guess the whole email sounds quite aggressive in general.
Yeah, and I would say so being aggressive, I mean, it depends on the context, right? This is a dispute about to happen, so I mean, it depends on your style and your country and how people talk to each other. Being aggressive by itself is not always a bad thing, but for me, this is aggressive and not convincing, right? It's one thing to be aggressive and convincing. This contract requires you to take these costumes. If you don't take, because this clause says blah, 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 and if you don't take them, my client will sue you for $5 million. That's aggressive too, but it's more convincing. So, okay, so why don't we start at the beginning with the subject line? So this is not English specific. This is every language. When you're writing emails, you're fighting for attention. People have extremely short attention spans. Your clients have short attention spans. Opposing counsel have short attention spans. And the first thing they see when they open their email, your subject line. And then the first little bit of your first paragraph. So your subject line really needs to communicate your purpose for writing if you want to get somebody's attention. And remember that your email is competing with the 100 or 300 other emails that person is getting that day. So the way that we the better practice is to have a subject line that's very descriptive and that communicates your point. Like if the only thing that they're reading is the subject line, they should still get what your purpose in writing is. So how could we make this more descriptive? I'm going to put on the track changes and we can do this together. So, well, are we agreed actually that just costume rental agreement what about it? This email entitled costume rental agreement could be about, oh, I want to enter into a new costume rental agreement, or, oh, I thought I would write to you, but the costume rental agreement we signed 5 years ago. It could be, it could be anything. So it doesn't tell you what this email is about.
Ana Claudia said, this is vague.
Exactly, it's vague. So it doesn't tell, yeah.
And Katia suggested default in costume R agreement.
Yeah, or breach. Yeah, so default, here, I'm gonna write some notes here. Default is a specific term you would usually use when there's a specific clause. You're not wrong. I mean, it's a tough thing because the concepts of breach and default are very, very similar. Default would be if there's a specific term in this contract that says, sorry, I just want to finish my sentence. If there was a specific term in the contract that says if the renter does not accept delivery of the costumes, then they will be in default and all of these things happen, then yes. If there's not that, we would usually say breach, which means they didn't comply. Or you could say, or non-compliance with. Breach is better, but this one can work too. And if there is a default, you can say default under. And I'm sorry about English that we have all these different prepositions of, with, under. I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. I didn't invent it. But Portuguese has it too. So, any other possibilities? Does anyone have any other ideas?
No other ideas in the chat.
Okay, so breach of costume rental agreement. And then if you want to be extra fancy, you could say costume rental agreement breach. Often in English, when you have something of something else, you can express the same idea by putting the second thing first and then the first thing, and then you're saving yourself a little word. This works almost always. So costume rental agreement breach or breach of costume rental agreement, it means the same. This one will probably feel more natural to you because it's kind of the equivalent of like de, G. Okay, perfect. Okay, so how are we going to address this email? Do you guys like dear sirs or madams?
Tabata has a question. Would
Yeah.
adding the company name somewhere in the subject be too long?
I don't think so. Actually, the subject can be long. Have you ever noticed it doesn't it can be even up to 3 lines, I think, on your phone, the subject. And then it shows up in bold on the person's screen. So it's actually good to have a longer, more information in the subject because it really stands out. You can do a test by sending yourself emails to see how it looks like on a phone. See what's the best thing. So what Tabitha, how would you redraft it?
Carla is asking, dear Mr. Jones.
Dear Mr. Jones. Yeah, I'll write that, but I just want to, before moving on to that, the company name issue that Tabitha raised.
Tabata is saying, I have no idea. I'd probably rewrite the whole subject.
Here's what you can do. We actually don't know the name of the company, but so. You can do that. Or you can do costume rental agreement. So lots of options. Yeah, I think, Tabitha, I think I like this one even better because it kind of personalizes it even more. It's like your client breached this. So you better rectify this situation. Otherwise, you're in big trouble. Okay, yeah, so Mr. Jones is great. I'm going to stop sharing this and I will show you another slide that I have that has some suggestions about openings and closings. Okay, so I have here kind of on the left side the ways that you can address the email, and on the right side the ways that you can close the email with general and then formal. So here, the dear Mr. Jones part would be in the more formal category, which I think is appropriate given the context of this email. It's to opposing counsel. We don't know if I know him already. Maybe I don't. And so we'll do dear Mr. or dear Ms. or if there's a title like professor or minister or something like that. then you would include it. I just note here that in North America, you can use either the colon, which is the 2 dots, or the comma. In the UK, they tend not to put anything. So it would just be, and they don't put a period after Mr. or Ms. either. So if it were in the UK, you would get rid of all the punctuation in that line. In North America, we include it. And then, so if you know the person already, you could just say your first name or even hi first name. So hi first name is quite informal. So you might write that to opposing counsel if you're, say, hi Tom, here are my comments on the agreement we were talking about yesterday. But this particular email is quite is quite strong in language, and it's also very serious. So I think it was Carla's suggestion of putting Mr. and then last name. And then for the closings, I don't think you can ever go wrong with best regards or kind regards. They're pretty standard. Again, in the UK, they would not put the comma at the end. And then some different options. Thanks, but I use best as kind of my go-to that I usually use. Cheers is very informal. So for friends, for example, thanks is a good one. Many thanks, all the best. But so best regards you can use as a kind of all-purpose one. Questions? I will send this, or Bruno will send this slide to you so you can use it as a bit of a guide. So which one are we going to choose for the closing? We chose Dear Mr. Jones for the opening, for the addressing. Which one are we going to use for the closing? We don't have anything right now. So anything will be better than what we have right now, which is nothing. What do we think of this here? Is this savable? No, it is not. Delete.
Katia is suggesting best regards.
Best regards is perfect. So this whole we, yeah.
Sorry, Maximiliano is saying I usually use yours sincerely.
Yeah, that one's good too. That one's good too. And this here, some languages do this more for like letters, but in French, for example, you have to include something like that at the end of every letter. Not in an email though, and it's absolutely it's very weird actually. So I would never include that. So best regards, perfect. Okay. Now, I'm going to separate this into parts so it's easier to read. So I just want to focus on the first sentence first and make the point. And now this is something that you will see quite a lot actually. Kindly do this. Please do this.
Miriam, before you go on, there are some messages here from Tabata. I agree with best regards. It's consistent with Dear Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
And Carla is saying, as for the opening, what about when we're addressing a letter to the company and don't know the addressee's name? Like to someone in the sales department, but you don't know who. Is sirs, madams still, or sorry, is sirs, madams still accepted?
So you see it a lot in the UK in that kind of situation. I hate it. So, I mean, under what circumstance can you not find one person to address it in a company? If I can't find a person to address it in the company, I address it to the CEO or the head of the, like in the sales, if you're writing to the sales department, the director of sales. Like I find that maybe this is a personal thing. The easiest way not to get a response to a letter is to send it to no one, right? The second you send it to a person, they have to respond to it. So my suggestion would be find a person to address it to. If it's to the government, it's easy. It will be the minister or the director of whatever branch that you're concerned with. If it's a company, as I say, I mean, failing anyone else, the CEO, or the whoever. Like, I mean, if it's a financial issue, you can write to the CFO, whatever the area. But I would suggest find someone. If you really, for some reason, don't want to address it to a particular person, you could do the sirs, madams thing. I don't like it. I like even less. In the UK, you will see this a lot. Dear sirs, which opens a whole other debate about inclusive language. And yeah, I don't like being addressed sir. Thank you. So you see that, though. It's much less frequent in North America. If it's an email addressed to many people, I'll write it down here. There's a few things you can do. You can do dear all, dear everyone, dear colleagues, if it's other lawyers. You can do that. So you're not dear. Usually when it's two people, I'll write both names, but if it's more than two people, I'll write one of these ones. I like dear colleagues quite a lot. You can do, if it's like clients that you know, hi all. Hi everyone. Hi everyone would be a pretty standard one if you're like negotiating an agreement, for example, and you're sending drafts all the time. Hi everyone, here are my comments on the draft you sent 2 hours ago. Hi again, everyone. Here are my new comments on the draft you sent in response to the draft that I sent. Because if every time you say, dear Mr. So-and-so, it gets pretty tiresome. Any more in the chat? I can't see the chat, just a reminder.
Before you go on, Katya said, please advise your client that we expect him to accept delivery.
Okay, what about...
And then, go ahead, sorry.
I just want to object to direct orders. Okay, the putting kindly or please in front of an order, this also I think is true in Portuguese and Spanish. It doesn't make it more polite, really. It's still a direct order. Kindly instruct your client is the same as instruct your client with a little bit more polite, but not much more polite. Especially in English, maybe, although you will see this, it's better to use maybe insincere, but to use conditionals. Using a conditional, and I'd like to think actually this is the case in Portuguese too. It sounds like you're giving the person the option not to do something, even if actually you're not. It seems more polite. So I have another slide to show you that gives you some options for how to do that. I'm just going to keep it, if you guys can see it okay, I'm just going to keep it in this view because when it goes into full screen, then I can't see you anymore and I don't like that. So these are some options that I suggest for whenever you're asking for something that's much more polite than please and order or kindly and order. So the very, very common one, very standard, could you do this? Could you do that? So again, it's kind of insincere in a way because you're not, I mean, literally it means, is it possible for you to do this, or do you have the ability to do it? You're not actually asking them yes or no, do you have the ability? You're asking them to do it, but it's just a way of speaking that comes across as more polite. would you, same. And then, so we're getting kind of more polite as we go down the list and a little bit more formal. And you'll notice that the more formal we get and the more polite we get, the more the sentence sounds like it's an option, even though it's not. So perhaps you could is very common. So it's like, well, I have this suggestion that maybe you should do this. Which is a great one, for example, when you're asking a client for something, because often it's, it's tough to give them direct orders. Give me these comments by 5 o'clock. Perhaps you could give me your comments by 5 o'clock. It means the same thing. It's just so much more polite. Would you mind giving me your comments by 5 o'clock? And here, so these last two are ones that I use a lot with both clients and opposing counsel. I would be grateful if you provided your comments on this document by 5 o'clock tomorrow. So if you tell them, please provide your comments by 5 o'clock tomorrow, they will not do it because they will be annoyed at you. If you say, we would be grateful if you provide your comments by 5 o'clock tomorrow, you have a better chance of them doing it because you're being very polite. We would appreciate it if you provided your comments by 5 o'clock tomorrow. We would be, and this one is even more kind of long and more polite. We would be grateful if you could provide your comments by 5 o'clock tomorrow. We would appreciate if you would provide your comments by 5 o'clock tomorrow. So you're going from the least to the most formal and polite.
Sorry. And one tip that I have learned is that the shorter, the more direct, right? And the longer,
exactly.
the
You
more
see here?
indirect, so the more polite, right?
So what you're adding, look at
Usually.
so think of it as conditionals, like
Yeah.
in Portuguese, the verbs that end in ia, I think. You're like adding a layer of uncertainty. So if you compare the first one, so in English we use conditionals are these what's called these modal verbs, could and would. And we're adding more words too to add uncertainty. If you compare the first one and the second one, there's only one. And then the last one, there's two modals, the would and the could. And there's also the grateful and appreciate, which is also adding more uncertainty. So you're going from 1 to 3 layers of suggestion. Yeah, so it gets much more polite. And then the third one is kind of in the middle because it's like the could you, but you're adding perhaps. So
perhaps only.
Yeah. Or maybe like a little bit less formal version of the same thing is maybe you could. So you could ask a friend, maybe you could meet me at 7 p.m. for dinner? Or your spouse, maybe you could empty the dishwasher.
Maybe you can do some laundry.
Maybe you could do some laundry. Okay. And again, I'll send you this so you can have this as a guide. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll send everyone that. Thank you. And there are 2 questions or suggestions here in the chat. Italo says, would you be so kind as to? And Carolina says, I would appreciate that. Yeah,
the first one I don't like. It sounds weird to me. It sounds like non-native.
Would you be so kind as to? It doesn't sound natural.
It doesn't sound natural to me. Like it's not wrong. People will understand, but it doesn't sound as natural to me. You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like British from like old British, like Sherlock Holmes, but like, would you be so kind as to? So I would not suggest that.
Is exactly that. Would you be so kind?
So kind as to get me some tea.
The accent was perfect.
Only to non-English people. And the second one, I would appreciate if you would. Yeah, it's the fourth one in the, you see. Yeah.
All done.
Perfect. Okay, so can everyone make a note of, maybe write it for yourself right now? I know we're running short on time, so I need to accelerate. But you make a note of the one that you would choose for the first sentence in your mind, and then I'll just so you can have that exercise, and then I will tell you the one I would choose. But maybe you can guess because it's an email to opposing counsel that's quite formal. I would choose one of these two. So we would be grateful if you instructed your client to accept delivery of the costumes it agreed to take the rental of. So this is also too wordy, take the rental of, to rent. And the other change I would make is it is good to start with your main point, but I find this a little bit too soon because we haven't explained anything yet. So I would put this at the end here. It's like your final request. And then I am very fond of beginning emails, writing your purpose with we or I in this. That's actually me, one person writing something. I am writing to request that your client accept delivery of the costumes it agreed to rent under the costume rental agreement. So it's kind of similar, but this is kind of, it's a request, and it's also, it starts with like, here's my purpose for writing you this email. So, and maybe we can decide later if we change this so it's not too repetitive in such a short email, but we can decide that when we get to it.
And Miriam,
So I'm writing
Nubia, sorry, Nubia is asking, I noticed you used it to refer to the client. Is that correct?
This here?
Yeah, it's not clear for me either, Nubia. You mean she used the word it? Yeah, the word it to refer to the client. Yes.
Yeah, it's correct because it's, well, my assumption is the client is a company. If it's a person, then you would use he or she. But if it's a company, here, and instead of saying, to avoid confusion, we can name the company. There. Perfect. I see another chat. Oh, I can see it now. Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Tanya? Yeah.
This is actually, maybe make a note for yourself. This is common amongst French, Spanish, and Portuguese speakers to because you don't have it. So to want to use he or she with inanimate objects like companies, whereas you should watch out. What I suggest is you make a list of the common issues like this, and before, when you're writing something important, before you send it, just go through your list. Did I make any of these mistakes? And go one by one, fixing them. Did I use he to refer to a thing? If yes, then change it to it. Did I use the request? Did I make my requests polite enough? Did I use the correct addressing or opening and closing and so on? If you have a list, then you don't have time to do it for every single thing, but for more important things, then it's a good discipline to check your writing that way. Okay, I really need to, are we finished in 5 minutes?
You can take as long as you want.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody would be here for 3 more hours with you because we're learning so much.
Speak for yourself. I'm sure they wouldn't be here for 3. If anyone needs to leave, please don't feel.
Yes, please, feel free, of course. But Miriam, take as long as you want.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So then so basically what we've done here is we've started the email with here's our purpose for writing. Here's why we're writing to you. Now we're going to tell you why we're asking for this. So I think we agreed that there were too many parts. So you see there are 5 parts to this sentence, which is too many parts. So how are we going to divide it? My general rule is you should try to only have 2 what's called clauses, 2 parts to a sentence. If it's more, then it starts to get confusing. And especially in English, I think more than in Portuguese and Spanish, the preference is for shorter rather than longer sentences. So it might even seem to you, oh, it's too short. It reads like they'll think I'm in kindergarten. They'll think I'm 5 years old. No, actually, it's good. And the other thing I have noticed is because English is the international language, you actually see, there's a certain simplification of the language that happens that maybe doesn't happen as much in other languages where you don't have foreign speakers speaking that language. So often maybe if you're writing in English, you're writing to other people whose first language is also not English, but that's not Portuguese, you know? So it doesn't help either of you to write big, long, complicated things. It doesn't help understanding. So I think kind of err on the side of more simple as much as you can. And again, the concepts that you're talking about are complicated, so the language shouldn't be. So I think this first part could be its own sentence by itself. Does everyone agree with that? I think it could be. I think there's enough information here that this can be its one sentence. Now, someone had correctly noted that the contract is extremely clear is not a very helpful comment. So I would remove the extremely because I don't think that really helps us. The contract is clear that your client has an obligation to rent the costumes. Now, another little item for your checklist is in English, okay, in Portuguese and in Spanish, you have a tendency to use a lot of nouns, so sustantivos, like this one. And in English, we have a tendency to use more verbs than nouns. So while this is correct, there's nothing incorrect about this. It's actually more natural to say is required to, but even that's too long. So we can say has to or must. Has to is a little bit informal. So has to you would use kind of in a, like you could tell your friends, you have to pick me up, or your kid can tell you, you have to pick me up at 5 p.m. tonight from school. Must, or I would use must rent or is required to rent the costumes. So again, has an obligation isn't wrong. It's correct. It's just we have a tendency to use the verbs more where you have the tendency to use the nouns more. Okay. So that's one sentence.
It's wrong or it's not correct to use your client has the duty to perform the contract or the agreement.
Has the duty to perform.
To perform.
So the perform the agreement part, it's right, but here we're actually I think this is better because we're actually saying what it is, what the obligation actually is. If for some reason you weren't, like, let's say it's too complicated to describe, I don't know, let's say they breached 52 things.
Oh.
So you're not going to state that
Yes.
your client is required to perform its obligations under the agreement.
Under the agreement.
Footnote, here's all the breaches. Or see the attached list of that you can put in a document that you'll attach. But in this particular context, I think
Just one.
rent the costumes, because it's a very simple
Okay.
breach. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
And Miriam, Katya is suggesting is supposed to.
okay, supposed to is it's not an obligation. It's like a should, like you, it's a suggestion. It's a suggestion. So I'm supposed to deliver these costumes, but I was late, and then I was supposed to deliver the costumes by 10, but then I was late and I got into a traffic jam and I couldn't, so I didn't. But that wouldn't be a breach of a contract. Like supposed to is a suggestion. I would say it's a strong suggestion, but it's still just a suggestion. Strong suggestion. Required is like you have to do it. I'll put here also have to equals obligation, but informal. So must is, sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. Must is kind of the more formal version of have to. And you see it used in contracts quite a lot. Now, those of you who work with contracts, what's the contract version of an obligation verb? What verb is used in contracts to create an obligation? Come on, you've seen it 100 million times. Yeah, shall, exactly. Now, the funny thing about shall is you should never, ever, ever use it in real life. It's a contract word. The same Sherlock Holmes person that I was talking about before, they would use shall in real life. Shall I get us some tea? You know, but a normal person in 2021 would not use shall in a normal context. So it's a word that is reserved for contracts only. The use and the misuse of shall is the topic of an entire course. It's actually overused in contracts because you see it used in a lot of situations to, like, instead of will, for example, talk about the future, like the meeting shall take place at 8 p.m. It's not an obligation. The meeting can't have an obligation. It is an imperfect use of shall, but you can assume that shall is used to create obligations.
Miriam,
Yeah.
I have asked a few American lawyers about shall.
Yeah.
Some of them hate it, some
Yeah.
of them love it, but the only, and I mean the ones that love it use it only for obligations. Exactly,
Yeah.
because here in Brazil, or not here in Brazil, but usually when non-native speakers use shall, they may mean the future or
Yeah.
whatever. There are a lot of misusages, right?
Yeah.
So if you do want to use shall in your contracts, use shall whenever you would use must. This is the rule,
Yeah.
right? Or this is my rule,
Yeah.
and this is my tip, right?
Yeah, anyone who's interested in this topic should check out Ken Adams' book, Manual of Style for Contract
Oh,
Drafting.
excellent.
It's the closest. He also has a blog. I don't have the link right now, but He's the closest that the English language has to having a standard.
All right.
Not everyone agrees. The problem with contracts is you have all these lawyers that, and there's, there's no contract drafting police, right? So not everyone agrees with him, but he's his work is very good and very well thought out. So if you, I have it actually, I have the book here. This is a third edition.
Excellent.
It has a fourth
Okay.
edition, but it's very good. It's a good
Excellent.
resource
Thanks for
to have if you work with contracts.
And Carla is saying, is it true that lawyers are dropping the shall?
So it's a very controversial topic. All I can say is I think Ken Adams' work is very good, and his suggestion is not to drop it entirely, but only use it in the more narrow way to create an obligation on the subject of the sentence. So what that means is, like, let me find A shall buy the company from B. So you're using shall to create an obligation, and the obligation is on the subject of the sentence, which is A. Or B shall pay to A 100 million reais. It's an obligation on the subject of the sentence. And Ken Adams would say, don't use it in any other way. He also offers a contract drafting master class on online, which is eight 1-hour sessions, and I took it. It's a little bit expensive, but it was worth it. It's very good. Okay, so we chose. So the contract is clear that your client must or is required to rent the costumes. Okay. Now, that only makes sense if we're then going to tell him what the contract says, right? Because if you're just saying that without quoting the contract, it doesn't mean anything. So here we have, it says. Now, I don't like this because the says is, like, I think you would say that if you're talking to a person, the contract says blah, blah, blah. But to write that is a little bit informal. So I would say something like section 12 of the agreement provides. Provides is a very good verb for quoting contracts. Or you could say states. Be another one. And I'm not going to make up contract language right now, but you'd include the quote. And then here, this idea, it's like a conclusion, right? It's a conclusion from the quote. So we'll say, therefore, the force majeure provision does not apply in this situation. Yeah? Period. Would not apply. So I would go with does not apply, because would not apply, would not apply as if you had a hypothetical situation. Like, let me think of when I would use that. So say you're negotiating the contract and you're speaking with opposing counsel about a hypothetical, like what if, what if a tornado comes through the city and cancels our event because of it? Would this apply? You're kind of asking based on a hypothetical situation what the effect of the contract would be. Whereas here we actually know what has happened. And so we're going to say the force majeure clause does not apply because we're stating it as a certainty. It does not apply. That is our position. Não se aplica, right? And so the would be like não se aplicaría. It's the exact equivalent. It's
Correct.
exact,
Yep.
yeah. So the conditional versus the indicative. Okay. Oh, and actually we can keep this because part. So that's the explanation. The client is not is able to perform the obligation, so the force majeure does not apply. Now remember what I said before about nouns versus verbs? This is another example, right? Inability is a noun. So what is a way to make this into a verb plus an adjective? Or even just a verb. Even better, just a verb. Is able. Perfect. Exactly. Capable. Yeah, capable is more like yeah, it's this able in the sense of Bruna, can you translate into like has the capacity to? It's like
Pode, tem a capacidade de.
yeah, versus in this sense we mean they can do it. They have the possibility of doing it. It's a very slight
É
difference in meaning.
possível fazer.
Yeah,
Uhum.
it's a very slight difference in meaning. It is confusing. So therefore the force majeure provision does not apply in this type of situation because there is no inability on the part of your client to delete. Your client is able to perform its obligations. You could also say is not prevented from. You could say, let me think if there's other options. Is not unable is also okay. There's a slight difference in meaning between stating it in the positive, is able, versus is not unable. Not unable is a little bit less strong than able. I don't know if that translates to Portuguese or having a double negative or a positive. There's a very, very, very slight nuance. So if you're saying you're able, it sounds a little bit stronger than not unable, if that makes sense. Probably it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. There's a very small difference. Okay. And actually, you know what? I will remove the therefore from here so we can use it next. So I would say, therefore, your client cannot claim force majeure and, comma, and must pay for the costumes. I'll remove the absolutely because that's not necessary. Okay, and here, so I think this is still okay to repeat the request, but I would shorten it so that it's not exactly the same as the first sentence. So I would be grateful if you instructed your client to do so immediately, or how about as soon as possible? Something like that. How do you guys feel about this email? Is it better? I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure we could find more things wrong with it, but I think it's a lot better than when we started.
And sorry, but there's someone noting your screen.
Yeah, I see that.
some blue.
okay.
Yeah, so if
It doesn't
you
bother
could
me.
not do it, please. Thank you.
I didn't even know you could do that. This is news to me.
Yeah, this is new. This was new to me too. But this morning I was having a class at Fordham Law School online, of course, on Zoom. And then someone started drawing on the professor who is a judge on the professor's screen. And
They probably don't
like,
know that the others can see it. They're thinking
yeah, they probably don't know the others can see it. Yeah, exactly. But so if you are trying to do something new, we can see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The host can probably block the feature, I'm sure.
I tried,
just don't
Carla,
know.
but yeah, I wasn't able to find where I can do it. But for the next meeting, I'm sure I'll be able to do it. So I have to do some research. But yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so that's all with this email. So I hope that was helpful. I know it's kind of a lot of information all at once. So what I'll send it to you to Bruna with my kind of tip sheets and those slides, so you can have that. What I've found helpful to me when I write different languages is what I said, to make yourself like a list. What are your, the problems that you often make, or the mistakes that you often make, and kind of when you're after you've written and when you're editing, kind of go through that list to correct your own writing. That's also helpful in your own language. It's just even harder in your second language. I'm happy if anyone has any questions about anything at all, whether it's it could be about language or law more generally in North America, whatever. I'm happy to stay. But thank you for your patience, and thank you for coming. I'll stay until whenever you want me to.
Ligia asked you to talk a little bit more about the comma, but I think it's getting late for some people. So Ligia, can you please shoot me an email so I can send Miriam your request?
Or I'm happy to stay, and maybe others want to leave and I can stay. Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. Okay. I was just worried that you might
My husband is not here. He's at our lake house, so I'm here by myself. So I have nothing better to do.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so please talk about
I'll stay and talk about commas. Does anyone else have anything? Anyone who needs to go can go, and anyone who wants to stay and talk, feel free. Yeah.
Excellent. So Ligia, Miriam will talk about it now. She kindly agreed. Thank you, Miriam. Katya is saying, Miriam, it was a very interesting experience. Thank you so much. Maximiliano, I have to leave. Thank you. Thank you, guys, everyone who has to leave.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet all of you. Muito obrigada. I don't speak Portuguese anymore very often. That's bad. I'm losing it.
You can call me whenever.
I'll call you.
Just on the weekend. What am I doing? Nothing. So let me call Bruna and practice my
Let's
Portuguese.
talk about commas.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you can address the comma issue.
Okay, Ligia, what is your issue about commas specifically?
Ligia, would you like to be more specific?
I can just talk about them in the meantime. I don't know if Ligia, oh yeah, there were too many commas.
You mentioned,
yeah. So there was a sentence that was just very, very long, and there were 5 different parts to the sentence separated with commas, and it was just kind of hard to follow because when you're like, the idea with a comma is that it's separating related ideas, whereas a period is separating, different ideas. And in general, that's the rule. And so I just found it very difficult to read the second sentence the way it was. And it's much easier to read when it's broken into different sentences.
Right. Were they, well, right or
Aye.
wrong, some of them?
Were they wrong? Okay, let's see. Yeah. So, okay, so
Comma for me.
I'm going to get very grammatical nerd on you very quickly, okay? And tell me if it's getting too boring or too nerdy, just say, Miriam, please stop talking. I'll write in the chat. So there's this rule actually in English that doesn't exist in other languages called comma splice. And if you master the rules of comma splice, you will identify yourself as an even more advanced writer of English than most native speakers. Because comma splice is an extremely often broken rule. And the rule is that a comma is not supposed to separate 2 complete sentences. So a complete sentence is, I have to write it. Complete sentence equals subject and complement. So for example, I think about English grammar. I think about English grammar every day. These are all complete sentences. And then if you want to think about different complete sentences, I love it. I love doing that. I love doing that very much. Okay, so these are 6 examples of complete sentences. Now, what you're not allowed to do in English is combine them with a comma. So I think, comma, I love it. Not allowed. I think about English grammar, comma, I love doing that. Not allowed, and so on. Now, the reason that might be surprising is everyone writes this way. Native speakers write this way. Everyone writes that. But technically, you have 3 choices. I'm just writing this down. 3 choices to make it correct. First is periods. So you can write, I think, period, I love it. Kind of like abrupt. I think, I love it, It doesn't really communicate that the ideas are related. Second equals semicolon. So you'll see, so people who write English correctly use semicolons more, which is a punto y coma, right? They use it more than other people. The people who write correctly use those more than other people. So I try to use them correctly. So I think semicolon, punto y virgula. Oh yeah.
Ponto e vírgula, yeah.
Comma is a Spanish, yeah. I think.
So Miriam said that the English word, the Spanish word, and I was like, oh, how do we say it in Portuguese?
That's how my head works. I'm like English, French, Spanish, all the languages are all mixed. I don't speak any one language correctly. So I think semicolon, I love it. Now this is both correct, and what you're doing is you're communicating to your reader that the thoughts are connected to each other. That's the significance of like the difference between the first example and the second. The thoughts are connected to each other. So I love it, you're referring to thinking. You love thinking. And then your third option is using comma plus conjunction. So I think, comma, and I love it. So those are all correct, but just using the comma by itself is not correct. But again, you know, everyone does that. So that's all I have to say about commas. It's called comma splice, this rule. Comma splice.
Commas are never easy in any language, right? I mean,
Yeah.
punctuation as a whole. And some people consider this correct, that not.
Yeah.
It's endless, but this is excellent to have like 3 rules that we can stick to, especially if we're not native speakers of the language. So
Yeah, and it's
this was
useful
very
to,
interesting.
I think simple grammar books are a good investment. You can just have it for reference. There's so many different ones, and you can use it to use this. I don't know if anybody uses Grammarly, that software.
Yeah, sure.
So I really hesitate to recommend it for non-native speakers because it's only right like maybe 60 or 70% of the time, which is, yeah, it makes,
Seriously?
in my opinion,
Even
in
the
my
paid
opinion,
version?
yeah, in my opinion, it makes a lot of suggestions that are wrong. And I think the native speakers, like my husband uses it a lot. And I think the native speakers can recognize when it's suggesting something that's not right and ignore. But I worry with second language speakers that, you know, you'll assume it's always right and then choose. So I think just be careful if you use tools like that. They can really mess you
They
up.
were always right.
It's not always right.
Wow.
No, it's not always right.
You gotta
Not
be
at all.
careful.
It sometimes
Okay,
suggests
good to hear.
vocabulary change. That's, yeah, changes the meaning too. Yeah, Carla?
Okay.
Hi, Miriam and Bruna.
Hi.
One thing that it's hard for me sometimes, but I think you already gave the answer, is to know if I'm like outdated. For example, when I first learned, I don't know, to legal English, people always say
35 years
he
ago,
or
right?
she all the time. Yes, 25 years ago. In order to
You were
use
talking like,
the
I shall
language,
get
you
you a
use,
cup of tea.
yeah, something like that. So can you use there instead of he or she? And I figured now it's
Oh, yeah,
very
that
like
way.
common to use there. I hate it, but
Yeah, singular they, right? Yeah.
so, but yeah, for me, the hard thing is that to keep updated and to really know what people are using. And maybe the answer is what you mentioned, right? So just to keep reading all the time.
Exactly. I think, I mean, that would also be true of your Portuguese, right? If you want to know what the way people are writing today, or especially the way teenagers are speaking, because that changes faster than anything, you have to listen to them. So yeah, just the reading. But for legal, it doesn't change as quickly as, you know, slang for common speech. So that's the good news. But I would say, yeah, just read and listen as much as you can. So your topic about the they, though, so that's I know in Portuguese you have the same issue happening. It's even harder in Romance languages with because words have genders. So eliminating genders.
We don't have the they, right?
Yeah, it's
They
more,
doesn't
it's
work
even
for
more
us,
complicated. Yeah. So there's, you know, what can I say about this topic? It's in evolution, like in every language, or wrestling with these issues. The singular they, I think, is what you're talking about, is becoming more common. It is a little bit weird. On the other hand, it's definitely handy. Like, for example, so that you don't have to assume if you don't know the person's gender. So for example, like the president of the company gave a speech. And then what would you write in the next sentence? If you wrote he, then you're communicating a pretty severe gender bias, right? In both languages. So you could say they said.
And in Portuguese, we wouldn't have
You don't have that
this,
option. Yeah.
problem because o presidente ou a
Yeah,
presidente, right?
yeah,
So we would know right
yeah.
away. Yeah.
The only option that you have is to keep repeating o presidente, or no, you don't even have to choose if it's o or a presidente. You have to say,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Unless
when
we
you say
don't know,
Portuguese,
right?
the president, we
Yeah.
would have said o
oh
presidente
yeah,
or
so you
a
can't
presidente right
you
away.
can't get
Yeah.
rid of it at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
unless
we
it's
have
abstract,
the
it's like
yeah.
the function of president or the
Yeah.
position of president, and if you don't know if it's a man or a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
yeah,
other
yeah.
people, other feminists don't care about the masculine neutral, like the masculine being the like neutral. It's such a complicated issue. It's not going to be resolved anytime soon. Fortunately, in English we have the, which doesn't have gender, so that's helpful. And then you have issues like this they. And then you also have the issue of now people are putting the pronouns that they prefer in their, like on their LinkedIn or in their email. So some people prefer, it's still not very many people that I have seen, but some people prefer to be called they as their pronoun. What would I recommend
And-
instead of Grammarly?
Yeah. Last question. Yeah. What? Okay. By the way, I have bought Hemingway editor. Do you know it?
No.
Okay.
I think I just use the normal spell check that comes with Word. The reason I'm hesitant about Grammarly is it kind of thinks it's too smart, and I like my software to not think it's smarter than me, you know?
Nice point.
Like it's for me, this is just my own personal opinion. For me, its suggestions can be so drastic in the changes that it wants you to make. Like if you run a 5-page Word document through Grammarly, it could come up with 65 suggested changes. That's too many. You can't, and you don't know as a second language speaker, like I said, as like my husband who uses it as a native language speaker, he can say, oh yeah, no, that's right, that sounds wrong, that sounds right, that sounds wrong, you know. But when it's your second language, I think you will have the tendency to think that it's right about everything, and that's what I find is it can lead you to error. So that's why I
I'm
don't
sure in
love
the
it.
next few years it will become better and better
It'll get
and
better.
better. Yeah, but it's good to know that nowadays they're not 100% correct.
Yeah, I don't know, Bruna, Carla, you're translators, but I really like Deep L for translation,
Oh yeah, you mentioned
really
it
good.
earlier, even for legal translation,
Especially for legal translation.
especially.
It
Okay.
learned it's been because all these AI tools, their quality depends on the quality of the material that they were trained on. So DeepL was trained on EU legal documents of the European Union. So I was like extremely high quality. If you want, can I take 2 minutes to just show you?
Of course,
I'm not their marketing representative, but I do use it.
Okay.
I use it every day. What I like about it is you can run whole documents through it as well, but what I like is you can change it as you go along. So let's do it. I'll use it English to Portuguese first, so you can judge for yourselves if it's good or not. Actually, for Portuguese, you can choose European or Brazilian also. Okay, so how about what should I write? Is that good?
Really good. Yep.
And then if you didn't like breve, you could say it. You click on it and it gives you choices. You see?
This is cool.
Yeah. Debe pagar. Deberá pagar. You see? So you can change it. So when I'm translating when I did translation, I actually use this as my main tool because you can, because of this feature where you can change it, and then if you change it, if you change one word, then it will change the rest. Like this one doesn't change the rest, but it would adjust the rest of the sentence. So let's put it.
AI is developing
It's
really,
good. So
really,
this
really
AI I
fast,
like
and
more than Grammarly. But again,
yeah,
I mean, again, though, so this is a good tool, but it's not perfect, right? Because I'm able to use this tool because if it says something that's wrong, I know that it's wrong, so I can correct it. When it's a second language, you just have to be a little bit more careful. These tools are tools, but they're not perfect.
the best thing that there is still is the human brain and the AI. That's perfect.
Like as use it as a tool, nothing
as
more.
a tool, exactly.
So here, if I wanted to, so I can make this the agreement, right? Allows the buyer to pay. Oh, permite. That's not what I wanted. I wanted privé. The contract. So the agreement provides for the buyer to pay. So I would prefer that it says that the buyer must pay. So I'll change. So I'll click on for. See here. It knows that this is what I will want because it's the first option. I don't want will pay, I want must pay. You see, so I choose that one. Pay the seller 10 million. So again, I think this is possibly more useful when you're translating from, say, from English into Portuguese. It can help you because you can choose, oh, this word's better, that word's better. But it's another tool that is useful for translation.
And every time we input information there, the AI learns. So in 1 year, it will be better, right? In 10 years, it will be even better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the idea of AI plus human brains.
Yeah, I think it kind of saves you, maybe it does 50 or 60 or maybe 70% of your work for you. You still have to do that.
Yeah, because you don't have to type every single word, right, from that 50-page contract.
That's the other thing. So it doesn't make typos.
Yeah,
it doesn't make typos.
When
you don't
have
to
numbers,
type. You're just clicking, pick this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like a multiple choice exam.
You don't have to
copy paste
all the numbers.
No, exactly.
There can be a lot of numbers in a contract, for example. So yeah,
I really enjoyed. Like I said, when I was doing translation, I used DeepL as my tool.
That's amazing. Miriam, thank you very, very much again for your time.
It's a pleasure.
And for everything you have taught us. This is very valuable for us to learn from native speakers because, as you said, we always have questions, right? English is not our first language. So we always ask ourselves, oh, is this comma correct here or not? So it's amazing to learn from native speakers. And thank you very much, all of you, for being here tonight. This video.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to say I want to apologize about English because it's a really difficult language for having been chosen to be the world language.
Right, especially legal English, that can be very tricky.
Yeah.
This video will be posted to YouTube, and I'll send you guys the link by the end of the week. So you can spread the news and share the link with everyone you love. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Miriam. I hope we are together again soon. Yes. And whenever you want, you can give me a call and practice your Portuguese.
Well, I'll take you up on that. Thank you, everyone. Obrigada. Boa noite.
Obrigada. Boa noite.
Thank you, Bruna. Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you, guys.